I think we all know by now that we can play PSP games on our PS Vitas, right? But what I don't think everyone knows is that there is a select group of PSP games that can only be played on Vita through the PS3 PSN store. Now, in order to get these PSP games on your PS Vita, you have to download them from the PSN store while you're on your PS3. Then it's as simple as connecting a Vita to the PS3 and transferring the game over. Here is my list of top 10 PSP games for the PS Vita that can only be downloaded via the PlayStation 3. Number 10. Crazy Taxi Fare Wars. A compilation of the first two Crazy Taxi games originally released on the ill-fated Sega Dreamcast. I hear a lot of people say these games haven't aged too well, and I'd have to partially agree. Nowadays, gamers long for a title with extended replay value. The quick, short burst of gameplay found in Crazy Taxi games just doesn't quite cut it. The game is shallow, there's not enough to do, and quite honestly, they don't run very well, especially Crazy Taxi 2. But you know what? They're perfect for a portable handheld. Quick, short bursts of gameplay is what I'm all about when I'm sitting on the toilet with my PS Vita. If you're familiar with the Crazy Taxi franchise on the Sega Dreamcast, you'll definitely notice a few changes this time around. The soundtrack, for instance, has been replaced, probably due to some sort of licensing issue. What is there is okay, but it has lost some of its personality because of it. And it might be my imagination, but I think there's a bit of audio distortion. Also, I've noticed that a lot of the advertisements from the first game have changed as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't there a KFC restaurant in this game before? Graphically, the two games look pretty close to the original on Dreamcast. Some textures might be a little bit blurry, but for the most part, this is how I remember them looking back in 2000. I did, however, notice that there are far fewer pedestrians on screen at once. Sometimes the city looks a little too empty, making you wonder if there's anyone to even pick up. In terms of performance, things start to get a little ugly. I was never really a fan of the second game, even when it was released on the Dreamcast. It just felt different. The car mechanics felt a little floatier, and the city just wasn't as interesting. And the same still holds true on the PS Vita. It also runs worse than the first game too, which is a bummer, but at least you can make your car hop. Stick with the first game. It's not perfect, but the frame rate is at least a little bit more consistent. Of course, nothing will replace the original on the Dreamcast, but being able to play the first Crazy Taxi on the go is worth the price of admission. And if all else fails, at least the mini-games are still fun to play. It's not the best compilation, but it's worth having if you're a fan of the first Crazy Taxi. Number 9. Gradius Collection. A collection of 5 arcade side-scrolling shooters where your objective is to make it through a level while collecting power-ups to increase your firepower. As your firepower increases, you're able to unleash a barrage of bullets and lasers to help decimate the opposition. Fans of bullet hell shooters will definitely like this one. Just a warning for those who have never played these games before, Gradius will do a number on your blood pressure. I just spent over an hour trying to get past the first level without dying. The thing that infuriates me the most is that most of the time, it wasn't because I got hit by something, but because my ship touched the part of the background. Perfection is key in order to keep your weapon upgrades, so it's in your best interest not to get hit. It also helps to keep the momentum going. My biggest issue with this game is not so much its difficulty, but more with the controls. The D-pad and analog stick doesn't quite offer the exact precision you need for dodging that many on-screen objects. Navigating tight corridors with enemies shooting at you is a prime example. It can be difficult to determine how close you can get to the ground or ceiling before taking a hit. Graphically, the game is pretty bizarre looking. It reminds me of a strange dream I had as a kid about outer space. There's a creature that looks like the Phoenix from the X-Men cartoon show, and then there's what I assume is a lion made out of sand, which on its own doesn't sound so weird, but when you think about outer space, those two things don't necessarily come to mind. I don't know. Maybe I don't know the whole story to Gradius. Someone please explain it to me. All 5 games are pretty much the same, with a slight increase in graphical fidelity and difficulty the higher up you go. My favorite would have to be the 4th game. I think that might have been the most interesting looking. This is definitely a game that will appeal to a particular demographic, so don't feel discouraged if it's not your thing. But for those who like crazy hard games, check out Gradius Collection. Just make sure you don't have any health problems before playing this, because man, my blood pressure is like... Number 8. Guilty Gear Judgment. Side-scrolling beat-em-ups are known to be repetitive, but Judgment takes the cake. It's basically you rushing through each level trying to see how much of the game you can stomach before boredom sets in. Talk about repetitious. I got through most of the game by performing the same move over and over. And it's not like the moves require any specific timing. I was just mashing away on the controller. The different selectable characters don't help much either. Regardless of who you choose, the game still plays out exactly the same. For what it's worth, the bosses do look interesting. And the one stage where you ride the dragon-type creature is almost fun. Almost. Some of the backgrounds look nice too, but I think the enemies could have used a few more frames of animation. Special moves look like they were lifted straight from the fighting games of the same name. I'm a big fan of beat-em-ups, but Judgment is pretty forgettable. A lack of gameplay options and repetitive use of the same enemy types throughout doesn't do much for its fun factor. So why is this game even on the list? Well, there's actually one other game included in Guilty Gear Judgment, and in my opinion, its only redeeming factor. Guilty Gear X2 Reload. I'm not too familiar with Guilty Gear to begin with, so I can't get into specifics on how mechanics play out, but I can tell you as a fighting game fan, this is where it's at. A one-on-one arcade fighting game with 23 characters to choose from. Everyone has a unique look and style, with plenty of personality to go around. And although there is some slight pixelation, it's hard to deny the amount of detail coming off the screen. I especially love the intro sequences that plays right before each fight. Gameplay modes can be somewhat lacking. There's really not much else outside of the one-on-one fighting, so if you're not into 2D fighters, then you're pretty much out of luck. Even if you don't know the moves and don't know exactly what you're doing, button mashing still produces some striking results. Cool looking special attacks and colorful screen filling super moves provide enough enjoyment and satisfaction to warrant a purchase. Number 7. Capcom Classics Collection Remixed. You know what I love about playing a compilation of old arcade games? If I don't like a particular game, I know there's many more to choose from, so I'm bound to run into something that I do like. Such is the case with Capcom Classics Collection Remixed. Whether you're a fan of shoot-em-ups, beat-em-ups, or action platforming games, Remixed has got you covered. My personal favorites include 1984 Counterattack, Final Fight, Captain Commando, and Strider. I'm not too familiar with how they operated in the arcades, but the emulation on display here look and play great. No graphical glitches and no audio distortion, at least to the best of my knowledge. Like all compilations, there's bound to be a few less desirable games, but luckily this time around, that aspect is kept to a minimum. Most of what you find here is pretty good, but I can't seem to shake myself at some of the other choices. Like, what is this? And a trivia game? Really? Some games were complete surprises as to how well they've aged. Give those an HD remake and they would definitely be relevant today. There's also additional artwork for some of the games too, offering a little insight on how the games came to be. It's a nice little piece of nostalgia for those who grew up playing these type of games. With a total of 20 mostly classic arcade games, you can't go wrong with this compilation. And did I mention, these are great for playing on the toilet. Number 6. Silent Hill Origins. You ever play one of those games that send chills down your spine? Or make you shiver with fear because you're afraid of something jumping out at you? Silent Hill Origins is that game. God, why is it so creepy? I absolutely hate walking down a dark hallway and seeing something limping around in the distance. The brilliant use of fog and shadow cannot be understated. Couple that with stress-inducing music and you have one of the most atmospheric horror games out there. The game starts off with you rescuing a little girl from a burning house. From there, you suddenly wake up in the town of Silent Hill. Now, you must find your way around and figure out what happened to the little girl. It's not the most complicated of story setups, but it leaves enough questions to make you want to keep playing. If you're familiar with the Resident Evil franchise, then you'll know exactly how Silent Hill Origins will play. Guide your character using a third-person perspective through each room, searching for items that allow access to a locked door, all while fighting or running from enemies along the way. The puzzles aren't too bad either. Easy to solve, but provides just the right amount of satisfaction upon completion. You're also able to travel between two alternate realities by touching a mirror, bouncing back and forth between the two. I would dread having to do this because I knew there'd be more monsters on the other side. A useful map system keeps you informed of where you have and haven't been. Just makes everything a whole lot easier to understand. The game is dark enough as it is, and having a map that basically spells it out for you is a welcome relief. And I'm actually glad you're able to carry all the weapons you want. The enemies are not overly difficult, but it's nice to know you have a spare portable TV in your inventory. The best part about this game has to be the sound design. Voice acting is either hit or miss, but the soundtrack is second to none, creating paranoia and fear at exactly the right moments. If you're feeling uneasy playing this game, then the sound department did their job. Little noises coming from every which way puts you on edge, especially when you go through the mirror for the first time. You always get a sense that something is chasing after you. Seasoned survival horror aficionados might be tired of these games by now, but newcomers and longtime fans of the series will definitely eat this one up. Number 5. Sega Genesis Collection. What more could you ask for? Turning this game on is like jumping into a time capsule. 28 classic titles from the Sega Genesis era, along with a few hidden arcade games as well. If you were a gamer back in the late 80s and early 90s, there's gonna be at least a few titles on here that you'll recognize. You've got Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2, both Echo the Dolphins, and all 3 Golden Axe games, just to name a few. There's also that horrible port of Virtua Fighter 2 from 1996, which is always good for a laugh, and the highly overlooked and underrated Comic Zone from 1995. Kid Chameleon, Phantasy Star, and Vector Man also round out the field. There's also quite a few titles on here that I've never even heard of myself. Flicky, Decap Attack, and Bonanza Bros is all news to me. By the way, was anyone ever into that Altered Beast game? I always thought it looked so strange. Like, why does he kick like that? All games come with a save feature, so you can continue exactly where you left off. Not only that, but there's hidden artwork and video interviews as well. And there's also a trailer for the upcoming Virtua Fighter 5 game. All games look, sound, and play exactly as I remember them. God, Green Hill Zone brings back so many memories. And that bonus stage from Sonic 2? You know, as a kid, I used to have dreams about that level. And let me say this right now before I forget. Shinobi 3 still kicks ass. In my opinion, one of the best compilation of games ever released, and now you can enjoy it on your PS Vita. My one and only complaint is that there's no Sonic 3, Sonic & Knuckles, and Sonic Spinball. What's up with that, Sega? Number 4. Burnout Legends. This is Burnout at its best. Like a direct port of the console games, Legends has everything you remember seeing in the Burnout franchise. World Tour mode provides various challenges across 5 different car classes: Compact, Muscle, Coupe, Sport, and Super. Race events range from Pursuit, where you assume the role of the cops and try to take out your opponent. Burning Lap, basically a timed race where you have to beat the clock. Road Rage, which I have to admit is my personal favorite. It's you against everyone else on the road. There's also Race, a standard 3 laps around the track against 4 other opponents. Next is Eliminator. For some reason, I don't remember what this event was about. And last, you have Face Off, which in my opinion is pretty pointless and boring. There's also single events if you don't feel like bothering with World Tour. The game runs beautifully. Out of my entire playtime, I only noticed 2 instances where the frame rate dropped. Tracks are clearly defined with a good draw distance. Environments are wonderfully detailed, ranging from the urban city to a lush tropical jungle. Some of them even have alternate routes, so it won't always seem like you're racing in a straight line either. And I know I say this about every racing game, but the palm trees really do look nice. Car models sport excellent detail as well. Shattered windshields, loose bumpers, and swinging passenger doors are a result of some of the intense crashes. A smart AI hell-bent on taking you out provide a nice challenge as well, which is why it feels so satisfying when you're the one dishing out the pain. I will admit, it's kind of hilarious how sometimes when you crash, your car flings straight up in the air. I can't get over that for some reason. For the most part, the crashes do look pretty awesome. Dodging oncoming traffic is fun too. It just makes you feel so cool and dangerous. Reminds me of that highway chase scene from The Matrix Reloaded. Anybody remember that one? And now for my one and only complaint, the music selection. The game starts off with the most annoying tracks known to man. Just a whole bunch of people yelling and screaming into the microphone. Thankfully, the music did get better the longer I played the game. I wonder, is there a way for me to customize the audio tracks? Number 3. Tomb Raider Anniversary. A huge improvement over the PS1 original. Adopting the control scheme from Tomb Raider Legends, Anniversary forgoes the clunky and awkward mechanics found in past Tomb Raider games. A direct port of the PS2 game, Anniversary on PSP/Vita, plays and looks faithful to its console counterpart. The main gripe here is the overly sensitive analog stick. Timing your jumps can get a little difficult, especially the ones where you have to grab the ledge at a certain angle. Another problem is that sometimes it's not very clear where you need to jump either. Combat-wise, there's very little of it. With the heavy emphasis on exploration, gunplay takes a backseat this time around. I mean, it's still there, just don't expect a lot of it. Levels involve environmental puzzles that will tax your brain. This game does not hold your hand at all. You really have to study your surroundings and take mental notes of where things are in relation to one another. It's not so bad once you get into the swing of things. Of course, I feel an on-screen map would have helped tremendously. Upon first starting the game, the first thing I noticed was the frame rate. If I'm being honest, it's not terrible. In fact, I hardly notice it after 5 minutes. Graphically, it's not quite as sharp looking as it is on the PS2, but definitely above average against other PSP titles. Environmental effects and other graphical touches doesn't hurt either. Compared to adventure titles today, it's a huge departure. There's a lot of levers you're gonna have to pull, so be prepared for that. And the crate pushing hasn't aged all that well either. But everything else is fantastic. With a bit of practice, climbing, jumping, and swinging all feel great. Just don't go into this game expecting to blow stuff up. The game rewards patience and discovery. It'll take some time to get adjusted to, but the satisfaction you get from figuring out that puzzle is immense. For gamers who missed Laura's first 3D adventure back in 1996, Tomb Raider Anniversary is the perfect place to start. Number 2. Afterburner Black Falcon. This game is so awesome. Absolutely qualifies as a hidden gem. It's fast, fun, and highly addicting. Which is strange because at first glance, you'd think the game would grow repetitive pretty quickly. Quite the opposite actually. Although you'll be seeing the same explosions over and over, the various missions offer unique objectives to keep the gameplay fresh and exciting. The game is simple and straightforward. Enemy jets come at you in an orderly fashion with simple objectives to complete. But as you progress, things get a lot crazier. Soon you'll realize the entire screen is filled with objects and explosions. Missiles take care of locked-on enemy jets, while rockets take out locked-on stationed vehicles. You'll be tasked with destroying weapons factories, tanks, submarines, and even rescuing kidnapped scientists as they're falling through the sky, all while trying to fend off enemy fighter jets and dodging environmental hazards. You can clearly see Sega's arcade roots showing through. The game doesn't bog you down with complicated controls or convoluted weapon upgrades. Each fighter jet displays various stats with weapons you can choose to bring along if you wish. If you don't want to bother with all that, then you can just hop right into a mission and be on your way. The game also looks beautiful, running at a blistering frame rate with very few stutters. Each locale is different from the one previous, exhibiting great looking terrain filled with a variety of color and geometry. Explosions are plentiful and they all look spectacular. The sound is equally amazing. You can hear missiles and rockets whizzing by, accompanied by the constant sound of your machine gun. If you were a fan of Afterburner back in its heyday, then do yourself a favor and pick up Black Falcon. The nostalgia in this one hits hard and hits fast. Number 1. Curia Chronicles 2. For those who have never heard of or played this game before, do yourself a favor and pick it up. I'm actually quite upset with myself for not having played it sooner. The first game came out on the PS3 in 2008, which I passed up for some reason. So now here I am, playing the sequel. Right off the bat, the story hooks you from the very beginning. You're put into the shoes of the main character, Avan, who's told of his brother's death at the Landseal Royal Military Academy. From there, you decide to enlist yourself to figure out what happened. Like all JRPGs, the story is slow to start. There's quite a bit of dialogue, but luckily, most of it is voiced by a talented cast of actors. The game is pretty linear for the most part. You're given an on-screen map with events to choose from. There are key missions and there are story missions, which, you've guessed it, help advance the story. Once you arrive at the academy, it becomes your main central hub, picking and choosing what area or event you'd like to visit. I couldn't help but feel like I was back at college for some reason. You get a good sense that you're staying abroad at a school far away from home. There are also plenty of interesting characters to meet as well. And before I forget, I have to mention the music. It is so good. I especially love the soothing piano melodies that play in between missions. Now, this might seem a little superficial, but I love how after every mission, you return to your room and given the option to sleep. The music that plays with that image of your bed just looks so relaxing. There's also the combat part of the game. Without getting too in-depth, just know that it's very addicting. It's turn-based, where you're given a certain number of steps to move and do whatever you want on the battlefield. Once you've used up all your steps, you take control of the next member in the party or allow the opposing team to make their move. The game gradually introduces you to the mechanics, so you'll never feel completely overwhelmed. An interesting class system allows certain characters to do things better than others. Some are known for scouting out hidden enemies, some deal more damage, and then there are those who just replenish ammo and revive fallen allies. I also love the simplicity of the level up system. Just choose the class you want to level up and distribute experience points as needed. The combat might seem a little weird and confusing at first, but once you get the hang of it, everything will start to feel second nature. There's just so much you can do in this game. It can get pretty intense, but at the same time, it's pretty relaxing. With a fun combat system and engaging storyline, Curia Chronicles 2 ranks up there with some of the best JRPGs I've ever played. And although the two games play completely different, I can't help but be reminded of Persona 4 Golden. I think it's because both games take on a school, college type of theme, where the main character is always going to class. I don't know. Did anyone else get that feeling? Alright guys, there you have it. This concludes another top 10 video. A little update for you guys. It looks like things are back to normal, so now I'll be having more time to make videos again. Thank goodness, because I was really starting to miss YouTube. Okay guys, you know the drill by now. Give me a like, leave a comment, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I'll see you in the next video. Later.